In Genesis chapters 6 through 9, we talked about the flood of Noah and how it was brought upon the earth because mankind had quit worshiping the true God and had set up their own standards, their own values, and the earth was filled with violence, a very self-seeking world, and yet a world of what we might call rather advanced civilization. But be that as it may, all that world was destroyed, according to the account, by a massive flood. And just Noah and his 3 sons, all of their wives, were the ones who were saved. Now, it's a great picture of salvation, being lifted up above the judgment by entering into the ark. And we, by entering into Jesus and his salvation, we are lifted up above judgment. Jesus said, if you believe in him, you will not come into judgment, but you're transferred from out of death and into life. Kind of an ark picture there. But in any case, after the flood, the 3 sons of Noah began having children, and they began having children, and nations were formed. Now, there was a little hiccup as the nations were being formed in Genesis chapter 11. Now, in Genesis chapter 10, it gives an account of the different nations that were originated from just the 3 sons of Noah, and they can be traced as ancient names of nations. And pretty much, if you go through it, you can find most all of our current earth population is somehow traceable back to this table of nations in one way or another. And the tremendous variety we see of mankind all over the world, according to the biblical account, all originated from the 3 sons. Now, we know that Noah brought into the ark specimens of animal life, and 2 by 2 so they could reproduce. And we find a tremendous variety having come forth. We don't think that all of the species that are on earth today were in the ark. What we're thinking of, there were the basic families of animals that went along, because from the genetic diversity in the original ones taken in the ark, all of the variations have come forth from that time. And just as in mankind, we have quite a bit of variations, but we are still one species. We are still one people. All of mankind, humankind, can be traced to one ancestor in spite of all our variations. Matter of fact, in Acts, it says that God made of one blood all the nations of the earth. Now, when we talk about the nations of the earth, in chapter 11, we have this little thing about the Tower of Babel, or the Tower of Babel, depending on how you want to say it. And it was connected with the original Babylon. And the founder of Babylon in chapter 10 was a fellow named Nimrod. In verse 8 of chapter 10, it says he became a mighty hunter against the Lord. He was a kind of an anti-God person, kind of like the people before the flood. And he apparently, in chapter 11, encourages people to get together and unite. They said, let's build a city and tower whose top can go reach unto heaven. Let's make a name lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the earth. Basically, Nimrod's mantra was, in unity there's strength, and we need to unite, and we do not need a God to rule over us. We are masters of our own fate. The Lord came down to, it says figuratively, came down to see what they're doing. It's a beautiful little figurative picture here. And it says, the people said, let's go, let's make bricks and build a tower. And God says, let's go, let's confound their language. They can't understand each other. And it says in verse 6, God says, the people is one. They have all one language. This they begin to do, and nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. A couple things here. One, God just destroyed a world that had gone into rebellion against him. And here you have the next world, several generations after Shem, Ham, Japheth, and Noah. When they were gone, you have another generation coming up that's saying, yeah, we can unite and we don't need God. God says, okay, I'm not going to destroy the world with a flood this time, but we're going to scatter these people so that I can work with them on a longer scale, longer basis, and intervene in their lives, even according to the nations and the distribution on the earth. Now it says in verse 8, so the Lord scattered them abroad from there upon the face of the earth, and they quit building the city. The city is called Babel or Babel because the Lord confounded the language. Now, it's a very interesting that verse 8, the Lord scattered them. Now, we know that if you stay together, even if you speak another language, eventually you can figure out what each other are saying. If you live separately and have occasional contact, yeah, kind of hard to get along, rather rough to communicate. And it may be two things have been proposed. Maybe God actually literally transported people different places in the earth, or it could be that he compelled a migration with those people of like speech to go to separate, far areas to develop their own civilizations. If we go back 10 to 15,000 years in history, we find civilizations springing up all over the place, and most of them are tower builders. Rather interesting, because it says in this attempt to build the Tower of Babel, Tower of Babel, they were, in response to that, God scattered them all over the earth. Then you have civilizations springing up all over, building towers. There's another thing here in chapter 11. Obviously, this was the first attempt to develop a one world government. Matter of fact, when God came down, he says, look, they're all one, and they have one speech, and now they're united. And I think what he's saying is, it's not yet time for that rebellion against me. God knows the end from the beginning. He knows human history before it happens. And there will come a time when the world will unite against God and fight him. It's also called the Battle of Armageddon in the book of Revelation. And God will win, but was not yet time in the Tower of Babel. And I think of this, that there was a first attempt to have a one world government, and God scattered it. And I think of all the time since then, there's been attempts for one world government. I think it got a big push with Alexander the Great, but he didn't conquer India, and he only went as far as he could go, never even got to China, and never got up into Europe and Russia. But the Romans came along, and they expanded into Europe all the way into England, but they didn't get India or the China, or none of them got Russia either, I think. But then the Mongol horde comes. The Mongol civilization actually goes right up near Kiev in Russia. But they don't get India, and they didn't succeed in taking over Europe, although they wanted to. And so we see these attempts of forming a one world government. They were never able to succeed. We've had a couple of world wars, and no one, even if they wanted to, tried to develop a world government, came even close to getting it. And so we have this situation in the world. It seems there's a desire within mankind and within people who become powerful in mankind to control the world. Now, I think that comes back from the devil, who wants to control the world. John tells us there are many antichrists in the world. He says the spirit of Antichrist is already at work. Now, when you read the book of Revelation, chapter 13 and 14, describing the beast and the Antichrist, as John and Paul call him, he is a person who unites the world in rebellion against God, so much so that he can fight them. It seems very strange before this time that this could really happen based on our world history. But recently, we haven't had a ruler who's tried to take over the world, but maybe the spirit of Antichrist is at work, still wanting to take over the world. And for the first time in their history, when this pandemic occurred, all over the world, countries all over the world were doing the exact same thing, under instructions from the World Health Organization. Was that a bad thing? No. If we're concerned for the health of people in the world, it's a good thing to have precautions and procedures and all that. But even so, first time that I know of in history or even our modern age that every nation responded virtually the same way in the name of health and safety. Well, I don't think we're to the one world government yet, but I do think whether it was World War II and Hitler's craziness, whether it was Mongol hordes which would be claimed to be the kings of the East in Revelation. People have always presumed this is the end. We don't know if it's the end or not, but we do know there are always foreshadowings of what will come. And I think it's a mistake to say it has to be now, but at the same time, it's very interesting to see as the foreshadowings progress that what was once thought as being quite impossible seems we're getting closer and closer to achieve. One language was a power that was involved in the building of the Tower of Babel that God says, scatter them. They have one speech and they're united. We haven't had that until now. Now with our computer technology, you can have instant translation of virtually any language. And when you get into computer language, it's getting more and more melded so that everyone who writes computer language are basically using the same language. And guess what? The world is coming to be of one speech, and there may be another attempt at one world government. Soon? I don't know. I think it's a mistake to put labels or times on anything that's happening that we see, but I do believe these are foreshadowings of an eventual end of the world. And an end of the world, read the book of Revelation, there will be a one world government controlled by one man and his assistants. One will be another man, one will be what they call an image, which might be something to do with computer high tech at that time. We don't know. Just some speculations. Those are my thoughts for today. Thanks for listening.